So, if somehow you have not heard, it looks like Spider Man is no longer going to be a part of the MCU. Yeah, you heard that right. It looks like Spider Man is no longer going to be a part of the MCU. And why is that, you may ask? Well, it can basically be summed up as uh, billion-dollar corporations are never satisfied with how much money they have. That's basically it. So, yeah, it was reported that yesterday, I think, like late yesterday, it was reported that basically Disney and Sony could not come to an agreement for renewing their contract. To keep Spider-Man in the MCU, because I think their initial contract uh, basically ended with Far From Home, and everybody kind of just figured that they would just renew the contract again because it was a successful relationship that they had. But alas, that is not the case. Yeah, they couldn't come to an agreement basically. Now, that was reported. It wasn't necessarily confirmed by either of the studios, but today Sony tweeted out basically. It was a weird tweet. They basically said that Marvel didn't want to be like Marvel didn't want Kevin Feige to be producing the Spider-Man movies anymore because they feel like he's working too much, and and they don't want him putting too much focus into something that's not their IP. Really weird tweet that Sony put out. I personally don't believe it. I believe the original reporting that it's because they couldn't they couldn't make another deal. So but before I get into the specifics, let me explain what the deal was. Basically, their deal was that Sony finances and makes the movie. Kevin Feige comes over to produce them, and Sony gets 95% of the revenue, and Marvel/Disney, they get 5% of the revenue. And you might be saying, "Oh, well, I mean, it makes well, that's not that much. I mean, how's Disney only going to get 5%?" People forget that Disney does own the merchandising rights for Spider-Man, so they make a fuck ton of money off of toy sales and like T-shirts and Spider-Man masks or whatever that kids buy. They make a ton of money from that. So in no way was Disney getting the shorthand of the stick in this deal. And basically, what happened was, to make a new contract, Disney wanted to make it be a 50-50 revenue split, where Sony gets 50% and Disney gets 50%. And honestly, no shit, Sony's gonna turn that down. Of course they're not. Like, here's the thing. So basically, I guess Marvel, they volunteered to help finance the movie, but it's not. It's not just that Sony would be giving up money. It's that by agreeing to this deal, they're also giving up creative control, because if Disney's gonna help finance the movie as well, you have to assume that within that, then they're gonna have a ton more say, when it comes to making creative decisions. Because right now, Sony, they have the final say, right? They have the final say when it comes to making creative decisions. If Disney's gonna come in, help finance the movie, they're gonna be taking more of a revenue. They're gonna be taking a bigger share of the revenue. They're going to have more say as well. So Sony not only would be giving up money, but they'd also probably be giving up creative control. Of course, Sony's not going to take that deal. And here's the thing. A ton of people, their first instinct is to say, "Oh, screw Sony, screw Sony. Marvel is so great, and MCU is so wonderful, Disney is so wonderful. Why can't Sony just accept the deal, do it for the fans or whatever?" But guys, this is a business. The Sony, why would they give up revenue? Why would they give up revenue? Why would they give up creative control to their own IP that they own, or at least that they own the movie rights to. Why would they do that? There's no good reason for them to do that. The deal that they had was good. It was good. Marvel gets money for not really doing much, and they get money from selling toys and again T-shirts and blah 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 whatever. And they also have Spider-Man in the MCU, and Spider-Man being in the MCU, even though don't get me wrong, the MCU was obviously insanely successful without Spider-Man, but yeah, Spider-Man being in the MCU is a good thing at the end of the day. And on Sony's end, yeah, they were struggling with their Spider-Man franchise, so having Spider-Man be in the MCU is going to help their movies be more successful. It was a good deal, but Marvel, Disney just they wanted more. They were not satisfied. So, look, at the end of the day, I kind of have to side with Sony on this. Like, yeah, why wouldn't they decline that deal? Yeah, and I really just don't buy what Sony was saying about the Marvel side of this, where Disney is, oh, Kevin Feige, you're being so overworked. Oh, we can't have you produce the Spider-Man movies because, oh, you're just working too much. Oh. Like, what? Disney does not give a flying fuck about that. Are you kidding? No. If Sony had accepted the 50-50 split, absolutely Kevin Feige would still be producing the movies. They don't care. You think they care about that aspect? Yeah, Kevin Feige would still be producing the movies if Sony had taken the 50-50 split. That bit is just ridiculous. But anyways, like, yeah, I don't know. What do you want me to say? I kind of have to side with Sony on this. And yeah, I mean, this whole situation is crazy because obviously this is going to have some pretty big ramifications when it comes to the MCU. Because if you see in the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, or I mean not the end necessarily, but just Far From Home in general, they're kind of setting up Peter to be the next Iron Man, or obviously not the next Iron Man, but to be the next, I guess, figurehead of the MCU, to be the face of the MCU, to be the leader of the MCU. And now that's just not gonna happen. And and I guess Sony still wants to continue making Spider-Man movies with Tom Holland, which I think they can do. I just don't think that they can. They're obviously not going to be able to reference anything related to the MCU, and it's just weird. And actually, I had I'll link this video in the description below, and this video basically went into the contract and kind of. Or it basically went into the deal between Marvel and Sony, and I honestly I don't really understand it. So I'll link the video below that kind of explains it. And basically what you learn is the reason why Sony decided to go with like characters like Ned and Michelle instead of like Harry Osborn and MJ is basically so that again, I don't really understand how the deal works, but I'll link the video that explains it. But basically the way that deal works is that like those characters that aren't those characters, like Sony, I guess if once the deal ends, which it's ending right now, they won't be able to use those versions of Ned and Michelle in future installments, because I guess it's just like specific characters that were used in Spider-Man movies in the MCU. There are some characters that those won't be able to transition into a continuing franchise that Sony wants to make afterwards with Tom Holland. I know that's really weird, but basically the way that works is that once Sony moves on from this with Tom Holland, I don't think they're going to be able to use Ned and MJ and Michelle. So I think that's why they use those weird random characters, so that they were basically planning for this so that one day, which is happening now, if Sony and Marvel can't come to an agreement, I think the next Spider-Man movie that we get is going to have like Harry Osborn and and Mary Jane Watson in it, and it's just this whole thing is weird. And I mean, like I can see them moving on with Tom Holland, because at the end of Far From Home, you basically learn that everybody knows who Spider-Man is. Like, from the carrying on from that plot thread, you can kind of do that. But and again, I'll link the video that's gonna be able to explain how the deal works way better than I will. But like, if you can't use characters like Michelle and Ned, it's gonna be really jarring. Again, you can do it, and like you can, but it's definitely gonna be weird and jarring. It's just, this whole situation is crazy. it's so crazy. Like, and I don't know. I don't know. It's just like, Disney. Why can't you just be happy with the deal that you had? Like, it was a good deal. It was a ridiculously good deal. I remember before this happened, like, I never thought we were ever gonna see Spider-Man in the MCU, and they actually managed to find a good deal that works for both parties, that's going to be beneficial to both parties, and it's not enough for Disney. I mean, that's just crazy. And I mean, you know, on the one hand, look, Sony, they've made some bad Spider-Man movies. They've also made good Spider-Man movies. But yes, they've made some bad Spider-Man movies. They've ruined some franchises. So I got my qualms with Sony. Believe you me. But in this instance, they were absolutely correct in not taking the deal. That is a ridiculous deal, and it would not at all be worth it to them. You know, and people people saying, like, yes, when Sony made the deal with Marvel, like, yes, their franchise was struggling, but you need to remember that at the end of the day, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which everyone says, oh my gosh, it was such a fail, it was so bad, it was such a failure. Yes, it was bad. It was bad, but by no means was it a failure. I think it still made something like $700 million worldwide. Like, get this, the lowest grossing live-action Spider-Man movie still made $700 million worldwide. The lowest grossing Spider-Man movie is Into the Spider-Verse, but I mean, that's because it's animated. That movie is fantastic, but it's animated, and it's going to be harder to get people to watch an animated movie. But at the end of the day, the lowest grossing live action Spider-Man movie is grossed $700 million. So by no means is Spider-Man going to be dead without the MCU. Spider-Man at the end of the day is still going to be fine. I mean, will they be able to continue the success of, you know, just the heights of success that he's had with him being in the MCU? I don't know, but is Sony now doomed? Is the Spider-Man franchise doomed without the MCU? No, it's not. It can very easily still be successful. I don't know. This was a bit of a rambly video, but the news just broke. I'm still digesting it. I don't know. Is there some aspect to this that I'm missing? I don't know. Is somehow Disney not the assholes in this situation? I don't know. Let me know in the comments below. And I don't know. Bye.